Welcome to the St. Thomas More Lynchburg's Homily Podcast. We join Msgr Michael McCarron as he brings his insight and application to the readings for the fifth Sunday in Ordinary Time.
Now, I could be wrong, but it seems to me, I don't think I am, that pretty much everyone heard the first reading end with, "My life is swifter than a shuttle in a weaver's hand, and I shall have happiness no more," and then said, "Thanks be to God." Well, it reminds me, I've said it the last two Masses, it reminds me of a song I knew in my college years or high school years. It was called Dust in the Wind. Did you ever know that? Dust in the wind. He even refers to us us being like in the breeze. All we are is dust in the wind. Well, you know, my brother at his graduating class, if I believe right, it might have been somebody else, but I think it was my brother, took that as their graduation theme song. And I always used to tell him, well, that's great. Your class has the theme song Dirt in the Breeze. And and it's understandable that we might wince at that first reading. But you know, the first reading and the third reading are supposed to balance. They're supposed to say something to each other. That's where that theme that you hear in the psalm is taken from. And I would offer that that in fact it's a magnificent juxtaposition, and the second reading is perfect right where it is. That is to say that Job, of course, is bewailing the fact that he is lost, that everything has been taken from him that matters to him. Family and funds and status and everything is just gone, and he's done nothing to deserve it. The friends come and try to convince him that surely there must be something. Over and over again, to his wife, to his friends, to everyone, he says, no, God's just done this to me. Now, in the end, we don't hear it today. We're in the more dark side of Job. In the end, he gets a good answer. It's the people of Israel's attempt to come to deal with evil in the world to good people. It's a good book, a good analogy about what that mystery is about. And in the end, God says, who are you to ask? I made everything. I can do whatever I want. You're not one to be able to judge. I am. Well, frankly, it's not much of an answer for us, especially when we're in it. You know, Job can ring clear, sadly, to almost all of us who at one time or another, whether it's from just the early times in our childhood or the pits of adolescence, or the struggles of college life, or new marriage or old marriage or growing old, he resonates. And so that's why Mark is so particularly poignant. Now remember, let me unpack this just a little bit. And if this is helpful, then let it be helpful. Otherwise, discard it. But it's true, so. Last week, we had Jesus in the synagogue, and he healed a possessed man on the Sabbath, right? And they were upset because it was the Sabbath. And so today, Mark, who's writing the recollections of St. Peter, Mark is Peter's son, he refers to that in his first letter, is his son, and he's writing down what his dad was remembering what happened after that. And they leave the synagogue, and they go to the house of Simon and Andrew. Why do they go there? Because it's within a Sabbath day's walk of the synagogue. They can go there. They can walk there. And so they go to the house of Simon and Andrew, and they go with James and John. Note that James and John are with them. Simon's mother-in-law lay sick with a fever. Now, who is Simon's mother-in-law? It's Jesus' aunt. Simon's mother-in-law is the mother of James and John. Why are they there? Well, they're coming over to see their mother who's ill. You see, Zebedee marries one of the sisters of our Blessed Lady. Mary, the mother of James and John, she's referred to. Mary Salome is another one. And of course, our Blessed Lady. Why does Jesus go to Capernaum? Well, his family is there. He has a place to stay. I mean, consider the scene. It's a beautiful family scene. And why does she go to her daughter's house? Peter has married into this family. That James and John are the sons of Zebedee. Peter's wife is the daughter of Zebedee. She's never named, because women aren't named in the scriptures. They can't be official witnesses, so their names aren't given, generally speaking. All right? And so they're coming over to the house after church. They've all gone over because she's not feeling well. Why is she in that house as opposed to her own house? Well, ladies, you tell me. If you're feeling really sick, do you go to the house of your son or do you go to the house of your daughter to be cared for? Now, you could go to the house of your son, who would say, I'm going out for the day. Here's the medicine cabinets right over there, and I'll be back. Do you want anything from Taco Hut? Or you could go to the house of your daughter, who will dote on you. And if she doesn't, you can fuss with her, and then she'll dote on you. And it's not any different in the first century. And so she comes in, and Jesus immediately, the language in the literal language in the writing is not they immediately told him about her. It's the first thing they did is they told her about her, which gives me it's a better translation. It gives me a sense of urgency, and right away they brought him in and immediately said, "Come over here. You know, our mother is not feeling well. My mother-in-law is your Aunt Mary needs some help." And he goes over immediately, grasps her hand and helps her up and restores her to health, but, Mark notes, restores her to personhood. Because what's her job as a healthy woman in the house? To help her daughter with hospitality, to be a part of the welcome. So she's not just restored to physical well-being, her place in the family is brought back. She's given again the prominence she's due. So Jesus heals the whole person. Note, it's still a Sabbath. He just got fussed at for healing on the Sabbath in the synagogue, not because he was in the synagogue, but because it was a Sabbath. He walks across the road from here to maybe right there about where they are, where Terry is and all that row there, the third row. He walks across the road and he heals again, because healing is beginning to move in him with a power. He can't, Mark is saying this is not something he's keeping into himself. And then it says, when it was evening after sunset, they brought him all who were ill or possessed by demons. Soon the whole town was before him at the door. What is that saying? They waited till Sabbath was over. You know, Jesus didn't wait, but they waited. They waited until Sabbath had ended, and then they came. And now let's see, in Capernaum, I've been there a number of times, and folks who have been there too with me, you can tell me if I'm remembering wrong. The streets in Capernaum are about the width of our center aisle. Very crowded little city, especially right around the synagogue, because everybody wants to be a Sabbath day away from the synagogue, or walk from the synagogue. And so they're right about all in there. They're just packed to the gills in there. It doesn't take long until you can't even get by. There's so many people. And who are they? They're Job. Why are these two together? Well, they're the ones who have had everything taken away from them by illness, by possession, or because they love someone who's ill or possessed. The whole town has something that has decimated their well-being. And they know one thing: they should come to Jesus. They've heard what happened in the synagogue. Perhaps Aunt Mary's daughter has been spreading the word to all of her neighbors. He walked in and he made her better. They are an image of people who have had everything taken away from them. Then the story continues. The story continues that they all finally go to bed. Now, in biblical times in Israel, a house would be especially in Capernaum. Again, Peter's house is still there, by the way, and it's gotten much bigger, became a church over the first and second centuries where people would meet. But his home, the center part of it, is still there, and it's about from that step maybe to the end of the carpet there. So it's small, and there's supposedly one hole in the top of the roof to let the smoke go out when you're cooking something. But otherwise, it's pretty dark. And when you go to bed, you close the and you put the kids there, and then you put the in-laws there next to them on the floor. They're in their mats. And then if you have guests who are relatives, like James and John, who might still be there, you would put them there, and then you'd have the man and the woman, the husband and the wife, the head of the household. They'd be kind of left. And if you have a kind of a top-notch guest, that person would be right here, like Jesus. And then would come the animals. And that way, if someone breaks in, they'll get the kids first, and then they'll get the in-laws, and then they'll get the other. And by the time they get to you, you're awake and you can fight them off, see. But they won't get to the animals. That's the big deal, all right? So I consider this the third miracle in the gospel so far, and that is that Jesus, from back here, walked over all of these people and out the door without waking anybody up. I mean, I think that's wonderful. He walks on water, walks on people too. It's wonderful. All right, so he goes off, and we have this place. There's a little alcove. It's kind of a cave in a limestone bluff overlooking the Sea of Galilee, but it's not very big, and you can see into it clearly. The wall is not far into the hill. And Jesus went there and spent the night there. Traditionally, people have always known, people, after he did it, people would pass the cave and say, that's where Jesus went. So it was oral tradition. They knew where it was. And he goes there, and they wake up, and they look around, and he's gone, and they're frantic. And so they go looking for Jesus, and of course, Peter is leading the way. He leads all the others. He's kind of the big macho guy, so he's going to lead them all out to find Jesus. And he finds Jesus, and the gospel, Mark, gives his dad one of the best lines in the scriptures. Peter looks at Jesus, and in an irritated voice, everyone is looking for you. Where do you hear that again? When he's lost in the temple. When his mother says, what are you doing to us? Everyone's looking for you. And so here it is many years later, and Jesus says the same thing, which of course is the universal line. That's true. Everyone really is looking for Jesus. You and I are looking for Jesus. Everyone is looking for Jesus. Peter has never been more right. And Jesus answers him. Did you notice it was an answer? It's not just a comment back. He answers. He says, and I'll add a word to make it more clear. He says, yes, everyone is looking for me. So we must go to the other towns, because they're not just here in Capernaum. They're in Bethsaida. They're in Chorazin. They're in the Samaritan place. Jesus is feeling the magnificence and the gift of this wonderful authority moving in a way that moves him. See, we have to understand that in the incarnation, Jesus assumed everything that was human. Everything. Everything that was human, even in our fallen state, except for sin. And that means he had to accept and thus redeem our ignorance. We have to struggle to know our relationship with God. We have to learn it. We have to hear it. That's part of the original sin. That's what baptism frees us from. By putting us in the midst of the community, it helps us to get the possibility of learning about how much God loves us and having a relationship with him. All right, well, Jesus assumed that to himself so that he could make that journey holy. If he didn't walk it, we don't want to walk it. Well, he walked it. And he was there in that cave, coming to understand with his Father what was next. And when Peter came, he told him, it's time for us to go. Now, Job, Mark, Job, a man who is destitute and completely bereft because everything's been taken from him. Mark, 3 different occasions in which Jesus voluntarily asks people to give up everything. But when they do, they're free. Jesus asks all of those people in front of the door, "You're bereft now, let me take everything away that troubles you, and you'll be free." Jesus says to the disciples, "I want you to drop everything and have nothing but following me." Because you see, Jesus doesn't give the gospel, Jesus is the gospel. The gospel is a person, which is why we should be very careful about debating it in such harsh ways with other Christians. We're talking about someone we love. Today, we see Job as that example of what it means to live human life without Jesus. If you don't have Jesus in your life, Job's understanding of life, its repetition, its redundancy, its dead-endness, well, that's the logical conclusion. Not only in the scriptures, read a philosopher like Sartre. Read any of the philosophers of the early Middle Ages. The reality is that without Jesus, there isn't much. But with Jesus, especially with Jesus as he's depicted, Mark is depicting this in the context of a neighborhood, of a family, a God who became human in a family with cousins and friends and aunts and uncles, who needs to sleep and is troubled and gets up because he's tossing and turning and needs to go out and think it through. That's our God who loves us so much. And if we don't have that kind of God, if we have a God who is ready to smash us every time we make a mistake, every time we have a sexual thought, we think somehow we're in the worst possible place, we don't have the right God, because there is only one, and that's evidently not him. If we have a God that we can ignore, a God that we can put on a shelf, a God that will enforce what we believe instead of calling us to change to what he offers, we're in the same place Job is. But if we have a God who has come to us in the ordinariness of our life, in the effort we have so that we all eat together, in the effort we have so that we live a chaste life in a sex-saturated society, so that we are people who reverence our spouse as literally the gate of heaven to us, given to us by God, and treat them that way in our home, as our children, from the moment of their conception all the way to their natural death, as a gift that shares the divinity of the incarnate one because they share his humanity. If we have that kind of God, then giving things up, well, great. We're not having them taken from us. We're having the opportunity to offer them to him. And what he returns, what he gives us, is so much better. I know. To do this gospel, to do this Jesus, is to make us stand out in a woefully different way. To give up the awkwardness of being an invitation to church and to the Eucharist means that I'm going to be a lightning rod for those who don't want any part of either of those things. To give up using my sexuality for my own privilege like it's a playground, yes, it's going to make me sometimes burn with desire and be sad with loneliness. Yes. Dear God, I hope I get more and more and more odd to this world. I hope more and more and more I stand out. I hope more and more and more I'm not like the world that uses people for their own needs and pleasures and then spits them out. I hope I'm never conforming to this world. Job, Mark, come. It's time for me to go everywhere, because everywhere people are looking for me. And what he says to us today is, can I send you so that they can see me in the you I send. May Jesus be praised forever.
Thank you for tuning in to the St. Thomas More Lynchburg's Homily Podcast. For the daily reading and to learn more about the community of St. Thomas More, please visit our website at www.stmva.org. If you were blessed by our podcast today, please give it a like, a kind review, and share it with a friend. God bless.